of Mind Over Masculinity, the podcast where we deconstruct the myths, pressures, and cultural scripts that men carry and begin rewriting healthier, truer versions of what it means to be strong. I'm your host Avik, and today we are diving into a conversation that really cuts to the heart of it all: the hidden cost of manning up, how vulnerability can actually be the ultimate resilience, and what it means to build lives of significance rather than simply chasing success. Yep. So, dear listeners, joining me is someone who straddles two fascinating worlds, which is performance and psychology. Please welcome Dr. Albert Charles Bramante. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Avik, for having me on here. I'm really happy to be here.
Amazing, amazing, Dr. Albert. So, dear listeners, before we delve deep into this lovely conversation today, I would love to introduce you with Dr. Albert. So, Dr. Albert has spent over 2 decades as a successful talent agent, guiding actors onto stages and screens while also earning his PhD in psychology and becoming a certified hypnotist and NLP practitioner. So, he understands not just the spotlight, but the shadows behind it, the fears, the doubts, cultural weight that men often drag into their work and their lives as well. So, today we are going to explore how these cultural scripts shape men's mental health and how we can begin to redefine strength in the ways that actually heal instead of harm. So,
Mhm.
I'll not take much of your time, dear listeners. Let's get started. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you again for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Amazing, amazing. So, Doctor Albert, I mean, this word, I mean, man up. Like we, as a men, we used to hear this. I mean, from our childhood itself, and
Hmm.
when you talk about the society, society often tells men that man up to suppress their emotions and to push
Hmm.
through silently and all. But from your psychological perspective and your experience in the entertainment industry, what is the real cost of this cultural script on men's mental health? What do you have to say?
Well, I think the traditional side of, like you said, man up, be a man, don't show your emotions. Men don't cry, boys
Mhm.
don't cry. That was, I grew up in the 80s, so that was old school, like the Gen X, if you want to
Yeah.
call it that, way of parenting, especially for boys, was to be tough. Don't show your emotion. And I believe that is doing somewhat of a disservice or disadvantage for men, because we're taught at an early age that these emotions that we're experiencing, that are kind of the normal human experience of sadness or hurt or even vulnerability, is
Mhm.
taboo for our community. And
Exactly.
that's adding up, and that's why you see a lot, especially if you look at history, why there's more substance abuse users, addicts, that are skewed more towards men that are in rehab or in recovery, or even, dying each year to drugs, suicide, homicide. So there's a high cost of that, because we can't bury our emotions are not meant to be buried. They can be temporarily. We can do that. Okay, put a lid on it. However, it never goes away. It just builds and builds and festers up. Before you know it, we're going to erupt.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I have to say this that do you think that the industry that you have worked in, where image and perception are everything, magnifies that cost even more?
I think so, more,
Mhm.
traditionally. Yeah. I mean, if you look at
Mm.
a lot of the traditional ads, and movie portrayals of men, again, you had the alpha male, the one that was the protector, the breadwinner, the all amount, the tough, like the Marlboro Man. I'm using that as an archetype. A classic archetype of the 70s and 80s of the ideal man. Again, it's supposed to be this, tough, um, you know, one that is the leader of everything, the alpha, and the one that really takes no prisoners, the one that and it's played a huge role. I mean, I grew up if you look at a lot of the adverts for boys and girls, for a lot of boys, you see a lot of ads like targeting like fighting, like GI Joe and Star Wars and all of that, and combative, heavy competitive sports. And a lot of the toys that are geared towards girls are more about like taking care of dolls, cooking, more submissive activities. And I know that in my generation, if a boy was seen playing with girls' toys, that was a big no-no. No, you couldn't do that. That was a taboo topic. And one of the things that the interesting things about gender is that, we're kind of born as a blank slate as far as like what it means to be a male or female. That's all taught to us by media, by society, by our parents, by our families. So if a boy is raised with, like, let's say sisters, and his sisters are putting on makeup and trying out new clothes like dresses. Well, young children are very impressionable, so they're gonna just follow along, and he's gonna see what his sister's doing and may try on makeup and may put on a dress. And immediately, both his mom and dad are gonna be horrified by that and scream at him and shame him into that. Like, dude, boys don't do that. So all of this stuff about what it means to really be male or female is really scripted since birth, and that's by our upbringing, by our culture, by our society, and certainly media has a huge role into this.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. I mean, I love like how you frame that because the cost is not about just the burnout or the depression, but it's all about the quiet, what I say, the quiet erosion of the connection. So, like men end up living in isolation even when surrounded by a lot of people. Also, so that's
Absolutely.
yeah. And also about when you talk about the men and the strength also comes. So you talk about the performance psychology, and strength is often mistaken for the toughness. But what if the real strength is vulnerability? So, any of you, yeah,
Well,
why? Yeah, I mean, yeah, please say, yeah.
I would absolutely agree with that because especially now in the past, I would say since the early 2000s, we started to see a shift into what it really means to be strong. And now it's more about being vulnerable. But there's also because of that shift in that, now that the way men are being raised,
Mm,
that it's okay to show your emotions at times. It's okay to admit weakness. And again, this is what I'm speaking taboo language from the 80s. It's okay for a man to cry now, to show his emotions. Again, that was not in the 80s and 90s, early 90s,
mm,
a man crying was seen as like weak, real weakness. And, it was antithetical to masculinity
mm,
was the idea of the man crying. So it becomes a little more acceptable nowadays for men to be vulnerable because again, the amount of emotions that are expressed and experienced are, I feel, always identical, to
mm,
whether we're male or female. It's more of the how are we socialized to express that? How are we socialized to, process all of that? And that makes a huge difference. But, to say that men are not feeling, well, look at all the, again, as I mentioned, the substance use cases, the
mm,
aggression, because I always feel that aggression, especially in men,
mm.
is really can be unchanneled depression,
Mm,
or that instead of that, they don't know how to experience sadness, so it's easier to express anger the same
yeah.
way. And that's why we see a high degree of crime rate, crime spree,
Mm,
even suicide rates amongst men, are higher. Now, the latest statistic, well, one of the classic statistics around suicide
mm,
is that, now females are more likely to attempt suicide, but men are 3 times more likely to complete and successfully commit suicide. That's because they use more lethal force. The reason why this is also more dangerous is because a lot of times this is done without any warning.
mm,
There's no talking about it. There's no moaning about it. It just happens. And
yeah.
where a man might use gun or do some other violent means to end his life. But and then everyone is sitting there saying, I don't know what happened.
Mm,
Well, I could tell you what happened. It was building and building and building. He just did not know how to express it outwardly. So the amount of emotions expressed by both genders is at least experience is identical. How it's expressed
mm,
is differently, and I think having these conversations about maybe the newer framework about masculinity is important. That it's okay for because a lot of people equate like masculinity with leadership, and I always say it's okay. It's great for leaders to be vulnerable at the same time.
mm. Agree. Agree with you. So, like, I mean, how do you personally encourage men you work with, that whether the actors or clients, to embrace vulnerability without feeling it like it undermines their masculinity? What do you say?
Well, I kind of almost like maybe redefining masculinity is number one. And if you want to say logical, if you want to say it's logical, it's being assertive, that has nothing to do with expressing your emotions. That has nothing to do with admitting how you're feeling.
Mm,
The important thing is that we're human. All of us are having a human experience. And the human experience means that there's gonna be emotions we're gonna like. There's gonna be days that are gonna be great. There's also gonna be emotions that are not gonna be so pleasant, that we're gonna experience thoughts that are not gonna be so pleasant. So the idea here is just to be honest and deal with the emotions as they come in rather than burying it and burying it and burying it. Because again, it'll sneak up, it'll catch up on you. And temporarily, maybe you can maybe escape it for some time being and be able to put it in the back burner. But eventually, it's just going to simmer up and explode
yeah,
somehow.
exactly. Exactly true. So, and also like in your career, you have helped the actors land big roles, success in the world's eyes. But I wonder, like for men in particular, why do you think that we get so trapped in the case, with the chase basically for external validation instead of kind of internal alignment?
Well, because we may not have received enough love or
Mm,
validation from our family of origin growing up, from our parents, from our teachers, our family. And so, and human beings, now I'm not talking about men or women specifically. I'm talking about human beings need a lot of emotion, a lot of validation
mm,
and
yeah,
love, especially as children. Love and security. It's not nice to have, it's vital. So when we don't have enough of that, we're then going to be chasing that in other people.
mm,
And, it may look differently. Like for women, it might mean, people pleasing. For men, it might be more of like showing off, or what we call the peacock effect, where it's like the man has to flex in order to get likes or fans or eyeballs to notice him. So that's why sometimes you'll see men, sometimes young men, thinking it's okay to flash around their muscles or their weapons or fancy cars, or the
mm,
car racing, because again, it's all about, I need validation. I need someone to be impressed with what I can do.
yeah, yep. Exactly. Hmm. And like for the burnout, like burnout has become almost a kind of badge of honor in our culture. And on that perspective, like, do you think that, or do you believe that men need to unlearn about achievement and resilience if they are going to stay mentally well in the long run?
Absolutely, because burnout is a huge factor
Yeah.
um, in today's world.
Yep.
Because a lot of, especially men, or just really anybody in general, has the misconception that I must be incredibly busy to be successful. I need to be incredibly busy to be productive. Yeah, I need to be working those 40 or 60, 80-hour weeks to be productive. And that's
Mm,
the farthest thing from the truth. So, and we only have so much of a reserve before, if we don't take a rest, if we don't take a break, eventually we're just going to be, deplete ourselves so much so. And you'll hear a lot of people say, especially men, no, statements like, oh, no rest for the wicked, or I'll sleep when I'm dead. And that's
mm,
counterproductive because when we burn out, when we deplete, we may not even realize we're at that point yet,
mm,
but our work starts to suffer, our relationships suffer because we're often very short, nasty, short fused with the people that love us, the people that really are important to us. And also, a lot of times, even at work or business, we start to drop the ball a bit because we're tired, we're depleted, we're not at full capacity. So we'd have to unlearn a lot of this stuff.
mhm.
And we have to learn that it's okay to take vacations. It's okay to take breaks. It's okay to recharge.
It's so, and in your journey, like between the demands of entertainment and psychology, how have you personally navigated the burnout?
With burnout, the important thing is to take breaks. Um,
Mm,
and also, and this is one thing I tell my actors too. It's great that you're passionate about what you do, and and well, that's acting, and that's show business, and creativity. But the important thing is to be totally totally to do other things too. So taking breaks, showing outside interests, having hobbies, having passions. And this is why most corporate jobs, or most, 9 to 5 jobs, have vacations built in there throughout the year, whether it be 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, because we're meant to take those, and even if we say, well, I love my work, and that's great, and that's important, but you'll love it even more sometimes if you take that 1 or 2 week break to just totally decompress, because now you're gonna rest, and when you come back,
mm,
passion will still be there, even maybe even more so. So the important thing is to take breaks. The important thing is to really do a lot of self-care. I know that's kind of like the buzzword nowadays, but self-care is extremely vital and important for both, boys and girls.
got it. Got it. Hmm. And wow. So like, I mean, I really appreciate your honesty there, because resilience is not about the never breaking down. It's all about building a system of recovery and renewal. So when we talk about the legacy as a daily practice, many men think that legacy as something that comes at the end of life. But what if legacy is something you live every single day? What's your take on this? I mean, what do you say?
Well, the legacy is kind of like how we want to be remembered. I mean, that's the way I look at it, and what mark do we live on this world, and that's important, I think, for everybody. Even if you don't realize at the moment, I think that's a guiding force for everybody, especially and for men, it might even be like having children, passing in your genetic lineage or your genetic, heritage. The important thing is to leave something behind. And nowadays, especially with like, video and so much, content developed online where it's easy to do that, where we can
Mm,
record stuff and for other people to our words can live on. So, but the important thing is, especially for as we get into midlife, talking like 30, 35 and above, our main concern socially and psychosocially is to be productive, to be, is our life meaning something? Does our life mean something? And that's what legacy comes in. Now, what are we exactly leaving behind the next generation? Now, that doesn't mean necessarily there's a lot of people today that are not choosing not to be not to have children, which is fine.
Mm,
That's your choice. And some are doing it. Maybe they're not able to have children medically, or they're choosing not
mm,
to.
yep,
But there's still the importance of legacy is still important. Even if you're deciding not to have children, so you want to have something that can again make your life meaningful, and that's the important thing. And what that looks like for everybody is going to be unique, to everybody. But most of the time, especially for adults, midlife adults, the main task is psychosocially is our life meaningful?
mm. Good question. Yes, very good thing. Yeah. And like I think that's such a kind of liberating idea because legacy is not something grand gesture in the future, but it's a small, consistent ways that you show up today. So amazing. Yep. So if you have to give one advice to listeners today, what will you give?
I would say, first of all, it's okay to be vulnerable. Be honest with yourself. If
Mm,
something doesn't feel right, speak up,
mm,
journal about it. Even if you speak up, to yourself and journal
mm.
about it first. If you're a little afraid to talk to somebody,
Right.
but definitely be honest with yourself. Don't bury your emotions because that's
Mm.
what's going to be, it's going to hurt you in the long run.
Yep. Lovely. Great. So, Dr. Albert, I mean, this has been such a masterclass in reframing that what it means to be a man in today's world. And um, for everyone, like we have talked about the cost of manning up, the courage that it takes to be vulnerable, and the shift from chasing applauses to giving to living with alignment, and also the power of daily choices in shaping a legacy. So, dear listeners, if this conversation stirred something in you, don't just fade it out. Take one small action today. Uh, Call a friend. Journal honestly, like Dr. Albert mentioned. Seek help if you need it, or simply give yourself a permission to feel. That's how we begin to redefine masculinity, one honest act at a time. So, Dr. Albert, if someone wants to connect with you, what will be the great medium?
So you can find me on LinkedIn under Albert Bramante, or you can go to my website at albertbramante.com. I'd love to connect. Send me a message and we'll chat.
Amazing. So, dear listeners, what I'll do is I'll put all the links and the details into the show notes for your easy reference so that you can easily reach out to Dr. Albert. And with this hope, until next time, uh, just want to say that keep building lives defined not by the accolades on the outside, but by the impact you create on inside. So,
Mhm.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Anik. Thank you for having me.